So welcome to another episode of Doctor, We'll See You Now, a podcast where we explore the intersection between technology and hospital transformation with a range of different guests from across the industry. And I'm really excited to say that we have Umang Patel with us today, who's CISO at Microsoft, and I have known for over 14 years. Umang, welcome to the podcast, class of 2012.
Hi, Tom. Great to be here. You're right, Jeanette. I was looking this up because if we were married, it would be our ivory wedding gift this year for 14 years.
Yeah.
And I was thinking you're going to go at the beginning, what was it like versus what it is now?
Yeah.
I think maybe at the beginning, if somebody said, how do you eat an elephant? That's my theme, to the ivory.
Yeah.
The joke is always one piece at a time, isn't it? And I think probably back then, that was our approach, right? We're one piece at a time, we'll solve a little bit, and we'll, try and solve the next bit that comes from that, and then slowly make that transformation happen. I don't know what the punchline is nowadays, but it doesn't feel like it's eating the elephant one piece at a time is going to work. I think there's a question about, are you stupid enough to try and eat an elephant? It's sort of part one. And, if that is going to be your thing, then maybe you've got to think about doing it in different ways.
Yeah. And maybe we've spent the last 14 years preparing to take on the feast. That is maybe where we are with this after all of that time. I mean, so we first met when you were at the beginning of your digital health journey, just like I was. And we have this joke about the class of 2012, but it does feel like so much of what we're seeing happen now, those elephants that we're going to have to eat, started back then. And the concepts were right and the hypotheses were right. Some things were too early, some things went too fast, some things went too slow. But you started off as one of the first 10 at Babylon. So talk to me a little bit about what that was like and how exciting that journey must have been.
I'll have to go back a little bit before that.
Please.
So proper job paediatrician. So
yes.
I think probably the context for me is going you sit in a hospital, you pick your career, what a privilege to be able to do that and treat children. And then you sit there going but hang on a minute, you've got to deal with this chronic condition your whole life. And what have we got? I can't keep bringing you back every 6 months and hoping for a different change or a different, something's going to have to give.
Yeah.
So I think all of that led me to thinking, well, what is that change going to need to be? And fundamentally, it wasn't really the technology that I thought was the issue. It was I just couldn't work out how we were going to afford it. So money was the big challenge. And, in the 14 years, that's just not changed, has it?
No, it's got worse, probably.
Yeah, it continues to be just incredibly expensive to deliver care, let alone good care. And we haven't really got anywhere, or definitely not nowhere far enough on trying to solve some of these challenges. I'm sure we'll get onto that a bit later. Yeah. I think all of that led me to going, well, how do you understand it better? That led me to an insurance company. That led me to Babylon. And Babylon was really, and I love telling this story. We were sat having coffee, Ali Parsonai, the founder, and he said sort of two things. He said, look, firstly, let's stop talking about it. Let's just do it.
Yes.
You've just no one says that in healthcare. He's look, let's just see.
We need more of that.
Yeah, we really the second thing, because I think it's funny, and I hold him to this. He was look, if anyone else is offering you the chance to change the world and pay off your mortgage, then great. If not, I'll see you on Monday. It's just brilliant sort of recruitment line.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hang on a minute.
It's such an Ali line, and I love him for it.
Yeah, how are you gonna sort of compete with that? So and here we are looking, we'll get to the end of the Babylon story. My mortgage is still very much there.
Yeah.
But it was that added, we did have a fair go at trying to change the world. And I think we did our little bit of it. Yeah,
I mean, you really did. And I remember, when we started Doctor, we took a very different approach, which was small and gentle, shall we say, in comparison. But I remember watching the Babylon story from the outside, and you guys copped a bit of criticism at times. But the fact that you did get on and pushed forward an agenda which, sitting here in 2026, is spot on the money, is something to be pretty proud of, actually. Just tell me a little bit about being inside of that. And, I tell the story of when we first started Doctor, having to co-locate our physical code in a physical data center. Literally, we owned a rack in a server somewhere that was ours, and having to write the most optimized code we could because we couldn't afford an expensive server. We've come such a long way from that. You guys were attempting to do clinical AI in, the early 2010s. Talk to me about that. I mean, it must have been so exciting.
Yeah, I was talking about this morning, actually. It was lovely to just be in a room, and it we metaphorically locked the door.
Yeah.
And we're look, just like solve this problem?
Mm.
Like what possible ways can you solve it without really like being limited? Like going to Rwanda, like just imagine that, like somebody going, oh, I think we're launching Rwanda. You're like, we've got like 4 users in the UK. Like we've got no credibility to like start in, and like let alone Rwanda as a country. And then of course it comes out, you go, well, the health minister said this, we think we can solve it. Imagine if we can prove it again, just for like takeaway soundbite. Like Ali going like, well, imagine if we can do one of the most developed countries, like in the UK, and one of the world's most developing countries, like Rwanda, like everything else in between would be easy. And we were like, oh yeah, maybe it will be. Let's just do it. And then, that was, we're all really proud of that. But it was that sort of vibe and culture, which was really magical.
I bet.
Sort of carried us quite a long way.
It's been quite sad to see that I think some of that just do it stuff has been beaten out of NHS innovators over the last sort of 3 or 4 years. I think it's a real shame. The thought of somebody trying to launch something of Babylon's ambition and scale in the UK now seems further away than it did in 2012. We are, many of the big and exciting innovations, which we'll get to, seem to have started in other countries and have come here rather than us having perhaps so many big, bold homegrown innovators. The people that are doing it based in the UK. And I think I've got license to say this is one of them. We're doing it in a sort of much more constrained way without that, perhaps the bravery that was required. And I think it's a shame to sort of see that get eroded.
I like real privilege now, because you sit at Microsoft, and so you get to see all of this like energy coming back. So like number of people that are like, oh, like I wish I could do that, or I've got this idea, and as many people as I can, I try to talk to. But the energy is definitely there, and the will's there, and the intellect. I mean, I came just from this morning talking to some clinicians from Imperial that were like, look, we want to solve MDTs.
Oh, amazing.
We've got this plan. In fact, I've built this. In fact, I've just built it in Claude Co-work. Sorry. And all of this stuff. And I was like, oh, hang on. Like, it was a completely different start point to what we've got. So I think the intent is still there, which sort of gives me a lot of energy. I think you're right. We don't quite have the same, I think we're going to get some soon. Like, I really think we're getting to the next point of being like, actually, do you know what? Whatever the adage is, if you hit rock bottom, the only way's up. Like, it sort of feels like no one's coming to solve it. We have, we can't get more top-down changes. It doesn't feel like. So it feels like people are going like, do you know what? We're really going to have to take this on. I think that's definitely coming from the clinical side. And I do think the clinical voice being pushed through and greater clinical leadership is going to be where that revolution starts. And maybe back then, 2012, it was a bit more like in the markets. It was a bit more, I kept on going, I don't really understand why an investment banker gets to run a hospital group or a healthcare setting. And and now I'll have a dig at you. Like, I really don't understand why we need management consultants.
Quite.
To do, all of this stuff. So I think there's something about how do we go about and sort of galvanize that clinical cohort. And not to get them to necessarily build it or, learn all the other stuff around it, but to say, look, this is what we need. This is what we want to happen for our patients and for the generations of healthcare that we're sort of building foundations for. And then start orchestrating the right people for it. And be like, well, I need this person and that person, versus maybe what we did before, which was people had great ideas and then were like, okay, well, I'll get a doctor to come along. So
it's interesting. It was quite often the clinician was almost the afterthought in the room, weren't they? Rather than the sort of foundational. Something I've really noticed is that there is no shortage of clinically led innovation. I think medicine in the UK, at least, tends to reward deep specialism rather than generalism, generally speaking, for want of a better term. And what often happens is you'll meet a clinician who's done an amazing job of innovating in their slice, but they aren't necessarily well trained or practiced in kind of looking left and right a little bit. And the really successful clinical entrepreneurs are the ones who manage to generalize the work that they're doing. And I think that's an interesting comparison to sort of my background as an engineer and then a management consultant, which is, you're sort of taught to solve problems and be a bit curious. And actually, I think medicine, it does train people to be curious and ask all the right questions. So it should be that somebody who's been trained to diagnose and do all the things that you get taught at medical school should be really good entrepreneurs. And I think there's something in helping people sort of just look up a little bit and left and right that will really help sort of turn that into scale. from what I've seen.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that we don't do it very well at medical school. I think primary care does it really well. I think GP entrepreneurs, and then you say like the difficulty there is like how do you get into where the cost base is, because primary care has comparatively tiny amounts of budget compared to secondary care spend. So I think the innovation has been focused, unlike say in the US where most hospital leaders are clinicians. That's been rare. I remember when I first started and I did my leadership fellowship, it was on this premise of wanting to be a chief exec of a hospital.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
And I remember, I was like, because I think we need more clinical. And if you look at all the evidence, and I remember doing something at the King's Fund back then, and it was like, well, the best systems seem to have, and I'm sort of like painting this in a way that like makes it the way that I want it to be, but it felt like the better systems or the more progressive systems had clinical leaders as their chief execs, not just as the chief medical officer. And I think we're seeing that, aren't we, in some places now where people are coming through and being like, but I just want that. Now go off and make that happen. Second part, I'd say what I'm really excited about when the other thing, which I don't think, and we talk often, don't we, about the class of 2012, like is a sort of network effect.
Yes.
I think we didn't have that before, and now it's increasingly like becoming so. Like I'm sure like me, you're on 100 different WhatsApp groups, and you get energy just from flicking through what people are being like, oh, I'm just trying to solve this, or I'm just doing that. And I think the tooling is becoming more and more useful now for people to say, well, actually, like I don't need to know how to code, or I don't need to like stop one career path in order to follow another one. I can do other bits and pieces because sort of the infrastructure is there.
The infrastructure is there, and being portfolio is more acceptable. And I'm super excited to talk about how AI, agentic coding, democratizes the ability to do things, because I think you're right about the energy. But before we get there, I'm just going to go back. So we went through the exciting years of Babylon, and that story perhaps didn't end as everybody wanted it to, but it did push the industry forward. I feel like there was real energy. I think between 2012 and 2016, 17, 18, we all thought we were going to change the world. And do you know what? I still think we will. Yeah. It's just going to take a bit longer. But we really thought we were right on the cusp there. And then I do feel like we had it was a little bit the COVID years, which accelerated so many things, but they caused some chaos and they caused some hangover. But I feel like we then had a fallow period. I don't know if you reflect that too, but it really felt, particularly in the UK, that things sort of collapsed inward, and we're seeing some of the sort of the shoots of spring now. What was your reflection on that?
No, I think the same, not just in health tech, right? Like I remember sitting there and like before COVID being like, we're going to have, personalized medicines, and like everyone's genome's going to be sequenced, and we'll like have very specific medications. So we really thought all these silver bullets were going to come true. I think COVID was sort of a literal and metaphorical punch in the face, wasn't it? That just when you're not as clever as you think you are. You go back to core stuff, and we all like the sort of trauma that everyone lived through. I'm sure there'd be a film or something that categorize it in due course. But there's definitely something I remember thinking. But we thought we were going to win medicine. Like we thought actually we were going to be on the next phase of that, and then you're like, oh, a whole new virus comes along that changes physiology in a way that we don't understand. I mean, just by way of story, I remember the first time I saw COVID toes, and I was like, what? Like what? Do you know, you sort of sit there, like you sort of sat there in the context of all of this.
Yes.
And we've got all of COVID going on, and then there was a parent saying, "But my child's toes are a different color."
Right.
And I remember thinking, should I like that? Just it was so random. It was this funny thing of going like, do I worry about that? I have no idea if I do worry about that or not.
Yeah. And there's no book to look at.
What do you do? And there was this only because it was in the news this week, wasn't it? About that guy that showed up blue.
Oh, really? Was that?
There was some guy that showed up blue, and basically he hadn't washed his sheets or something, and the dye had come off until he woke up blue. But I remember really vividly, the first step to COVID toes was scrubbing the toes with an alcohol wipe just in case it was dirt. Like this.
So back to basics, right?
Yeah, really. So we sat there thinking we've gone from where we thought we were going to be to like this real sort of, like you say, like rudimentary, put the foundations in place. So I think like the whole of us, so I don't think we beat ourselves up too much about it. The second thing that I think it did do, which I think is where these green sheets are coming from, is really set a foundation that if COVID hadn't have happened and we had that sliding doors moment and we were still sitting here, we'd be going, but we still haven't proven that everyone will use their phone, or that healthcare can have moved, because those were the challenges that felt insurmountable. So in some ways, I think that foundation has now been set that we know we can move sort of metaphorical mountains by like shifting care online, engaging with people in different ways. Sort of the first part of it. I think the second part of it is, again, there's a whole generation of people coming through being like, oh, but hang on a minute, I can't just, I mean, this is true of global politics as well, isn't it? Like, I can't rely on the world being the way that I thought it was going to be.
No.
We've got to take some ownership and sort of, you know, sovereignty over what we want to do with it going forward.
I mean, I think you did, and you did show with GP Hand, etc., that people will use these tools if they can. Like, we proved it, as you say, we proved during COVID that people will use their phones for all sorts of things. I guess all industries go through their sort of hype cycle and then they come down the other side. And we were right at the top, and then we got punched in the face by COVID. And perhaps that's why that lag happened, is that the fall was aggressive. But as you say, the foundation is there. I like what you say as well, Umang, about people taking some agency, because I think that is something I've really noticed, even in the last like 6 months or 8 months, is suddenly it feels like the world's gone, all right, okay, we've got some new tooling. We can get out there and we can begin to use that to change things. This kind of AI revolution, I don't know how it's manifesting within Microsoft, but certainly in the startup community, it feels like the can do and the get shit done are pretty strong at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, the same, like Microsoft's whole revolution of going, oh, like Copilots for this and, you know, Copilot for another thing. Like, how do you make it easy? And then what's a platform play and how do you make it secure? But you're right. Like, what an entirely different world you live in when people think they can build.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, look, like, you know, when I went to think about starting medicine, I honestly thought I'd have to learn Latin.
Really?
And it's like somebody advised me, you have to learn Latin.
Yeah.
So like I did some Latin and I thought you had to know Latin in order to become a good doctor, right? You know, and I'm sure there were maybe just before my time that was entirely true, just to understand the words.
Yeah.
And I think we probably are getting to a new point now where like, you definitely need to be able to type, right? Like you can't be a very effective doctor if your typing speed is slow, even with AVT, and maybe that will change it. But there's something going, well, like, what is the next bit of that? You take really bright people and say, look, if you want to do this amazing, purposeful job, which is like amazing. And, you know, I was really pleased to see that if you ask 13 to 15-year-olds in the UK, the number one job they want and the number one place they want to work, it's doctor and NHS.
Really?
Oh, and that's not, and it's third year running. Yeah. Right. So really, really exciting. Yeah. And you go, right, all these great people, all these great kids going, I want that. And then you say to them, well, you've got to learn some new tooling in order to be effective at it. They're not going to balk at saying, okay, great, I've got to learn how to prompt properly. Yeah. I've got to sort of get into understanding the governance behind different tools or understanding what different models are. I think that's the change we're seeing.
That's cool. I think whatever you do, and it's worked really well for us at Doctor Doctor, is that if you have purpose, that seems to be the one thing that in 2026 people want. Yeah. You know, they still want money and they want power and they want all of the other things that matter, but purpose seems to be core to everything. And I actually have to whisper it. I think I'm a bit of a frustrated doctor. I think there's a part of me that wishes that he'd gone to medical school, so I've spent the rest of my life trying to sort of fill that gap. But the sense of purpose you get from going into a hospital and thinking, oh, these people are actually using our technology or you're more hands-on and we're really helping them is pretty special. So, and I'm also interested in your point about prompting and those skills, because we talked a bit earlier about sort of generalists versus specialists. It certainly feels within Doctor Doctor that whenever I talk to my teams, I'm saying to people, to succeed in this new world, you have to be a generalist. It's not enough to just be the world's best product manager or the world's best designer or the world's best account manager. You've got to be able to do a little bit of those other things as well, because AI democratizes all of that. It allows everybody to build a POC or to send a cold email really well because they can do the research quickly. That seems to be a life skill rather than just an academic skill.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, I'm probably a frustrated management consultant. If my brother watches it, I love that because he's a management consultant and I take the mick constantly. But again, having that skill, I think sometimes, like, it's fantastic being a doctor or being a nurse and delivering care. It does allow you sometimes to be like, well, like, I don't have to then do the other stuff because, you know, I'm a good egg. I don't think that's true. Where people sometimes like, okay, that's not enough. Like, you can't then go in and, I don't know, order every test. Like, you might be the most amazing doctor individually to the patient, but you're probably not the most amazing one for the system. Yes. So actually increasingly we can get onto sort of the risks of overdiagnosis and challenges perhaps, like then you're not even in that case. As sort of more and more things, you have to become more discerning. But yeah, I definitely think that like this whole new ability to sort of engage people differently is going to be, lost my thread.
Yeah, doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, certainly the ability to engage people differently is going to have to change. You mentioned a minute ago that so people want to become doctors, they want to work in the NHS. What's your take on innovation and technology specifically within the NHS versus what's happening globally? Are we doing better, do you think, than the rest of the world? Do we have an opportunity to build something really special here, or are we laggards?
I definitely, like, I'm hugely biased on this, but I think like this is our thing, right? Without wanting to get into the politics of it. Like I was trying to, I haven't done the research on it yet, but I was thinking, like, what have we got as Europe, which is far better? Like, you know, we haven't got more people, we have definitely got more missiles, etc., etc. We haven't got more money or oil or the others, but we had probably got, if you sum it all up, the best health system.
Yes.
Right. Like,
yeah, I think
like
so.
Pros and cons of NHS, not English, you know, the Danish system, the whatever other systems, all together, I think we have the best health and social care system.
Yeah.
And we've worked really hard to get there, and we need to protect that. Therefore, I think we've got to work out how we scale it. So what works here should work elsewhere. Yeah. We definitely see that from Microsoft as an example. Like, you know, the second biggest market for healthcare outside the US is the UK. But if you break the US down into component parts, then none of them are anywhere near as large as the NHS.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
So like we need to use some of that gravity to be like, look, we've got this, and we can test stuff, and you know, we can, if we test stuff here, we can sort of act like the Hogwarts for AI in healthcare, right? And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, do you know what? Because I spend a lot of dinner parties saying exactly that, and saying how the NHS is the best healthcare system in the world. And it's a shame that the political discourse has begun to slightly turn against that, and I don't want to spend too long on that today. But I think the thing that really worries me about that is I feel sometimes the NHS has lost its confidence a little bit, and particularly with some of the changes that have happened centrally in the last 18 months, and whether or not they were required is, again, too big a question for us, I think. But I really feel like the NHS has lost its bluster, and I'd love to think about how we, as a set of innovators, can give it back, because it is such a brilliant thing, full of such brilliant people, and it should be a hotbed of innovation. I think
it only takes a few people. Like, so every Friday when I go in, like this, nowadays I haven't done it recently, but like a year ago, 18 months ago, I'll go in and say, like, who's heard of ChatGPT? And most people will be like we're too busy doing our own stuff, right?
Yeah, right.
And their own stuff is still amazing. And then it's lovely when you start seeing people going, we've seen this with ambient voice as an example. You're going in and people are like, somebody came and grabbed me like on the wall, and they went, like, you're somebody that works in tech, aren't you? Like, I've just found this thing. Right. And they were describing their ambient voice thing. It wasn't the Microsoft thing, but like it was like another one, but they were, and they were like, as if it was magic. They're like, I've seen this thing and it's amazing. Have you seen it? Yeah. And of course I sat there being like, like in my head, I was like, well, yeah, like, of course. Yeah. Like about a year ago. I
live and breathe this.
Like, all the time. Like, how are you just catching up? I was like, and then I was like, how jealous am I that I haven't been able to discover it again and capture that? And then you get into like, okay, well, like, if we desperately want to use it, which like clearly you do, then we've got to go through the hard yards. And I think that is the training ground for the sort of, you know, the new class that will come through that will hopefully be here in 14 years, sat there being like, oh, we did our bit. You know, we did our sort of tour of duty, for want of a better phrase. I
really hope that we have laid that foundation. You know, I remember all of those meetings in the sort of mid 2010s talking about information governance and is it okay to share information with patients? And I have to say we've come so far that it has hopefully made it much easier for these tools. I mean, you mentioned AVT, so we're in the middle of this AI revolution, right? And I really want to talk about giving doctors the ability to code. But before we do, so I think the Scribes are such a great example of that magic moment. And it's so hard to give people who are doing a really good job every single day that sense of magic that you and I get perhaps more often when we see the stuff that's coming through. They have created a pool that's different to anything before. I've also noticed in primary care, lots of my friends who are GPs, who I obviously talk to about health tech on a regular basis, they have suddenly started really waking up to not just AVT, but also some of the triage tools that are out there. It feels like suddenly doctors in the UK are ready to use these things. How do you think the scribe part of the conversation is going to play out? Like, so we're about to see everybody taking these things up. What does it look like in a couple of years' time?
Yeah, I think it is exactly that. Like, by way of separate story,
Yeah.
I remember the first time I got a colour mobile phone.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I was at Southampton Uni, and
Nice,
so I was
excellent.
probably somewhere where
Like all the best people.
Yeah, and I sat there, and I remember, and it was I know the T68i. I shouldn't pretend that I'm not a proper geek out on that. They were getting this thing in a colour screen and beginning to show people the colour screen, and they were like, "Oh wow,
what is this?
There's a colour screen." And of course, objectively, you're like, how does that help on a phone that can't take pictures and stuff anyway? You're like, I don't know, but
that is cool.
And I'm sure it's like, the same as colour. I don't know, but they're saying like, but it is cool. And then like, what does that then open it up into being able to get you to do? I guess the next bit, then you go, well, if I can do that, then I can start, thinking about putting cameras in phones and so on. I think that's where we're going with Scribes. I think Scribes have been, like, say, that magic moment of like, look at this thing, which is solving a real pain point for me. And letting me, and I don't think that pain point is just typing, by the way. I think by far what people love about them is going, I can just concentrate on my patient.
Yes.
I think that's then led to people sort of psychologically going, or like feeling culturally, well, hang on a minute, if I can allow myself to not get stuck so much in the bureaucracy of delivering care, even though I buy into the fact that I clearly have to document in order to be safe and so on.
Yeah.
But if I can use some of this tooling to avoid some of that and let me go back to being or doing the thing I really wanted to do, which was like look at people and care for people and like really show them empathy, then what else can I do?
Yes.
I think, what do I need in order to be able to do that? I might need some more information. Okay, great. Well, how can I do that without forcing them to come and see me every 6 weeks and fill in a paper form, which is rubbish? And, for them to be anxious, or like, I remember my dad being anxious about filling in a form, not because he was worried about the form, it's just like, my English isn't good enough to fill in this form.
Fair enough. Like,
and that, and then, then they avoid it. And they, so there's something about being like, what can I do in a different way? And I think that's the world that we're entering into now.
Yeah, that is exciting.
With the push and the pull of people being like, oh, wow, like, well, if I can do a little bit, then I should do more.
Yeah, I think that's right. It is a huge unlock when you realize that. I think what I found when I've started using AI note taking in my meetings is there's a journey, right? Because to just record a business meeting isn't actually very helpful. But as those tools have got better and have started like kicking out actions and stuff, that's starting, I think, to be useful. What I've noticed has been the real unlock for me is taking those actions and transcripts, combining them with my other notes, and then using AI to help me sort of summarize my own thoughts and come up with the next steps. That's the moment for me that unlocked that. And I'm really curious for doctors because I suspect you're right that if all it does is take the notes for you, it's nice to have, right? But it's the how does this allow me to practice much better medicine and perhaps link up parts of the diagnoses I might not otherwise be able to link up or bring in new data. That feels to me like that's going to be pretty special when that starts happening.
It's exactly what we were talking about this morning, which was like how the MDT meeting, the MDT meeting that you have, you've got, I don't know, like 20 big brains sat around really forming the next part of care. And then that gets summarized into one sentence that gets put into the notes because somebody's frantically trying to capture it. And you get this, like the minimum versus the richness of it.
Yeah.
So that's not to say, can you put the whole transcript in? No. Can you get it to, like you say, start adding something else in and then trying to shape it in a way? And like maybe not exactly now, but almost definitely in a couple of years' time.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people are starting to sense. And that's sort of going, that would be good. And then what I love this morning, the end of the conversation in the elevator out of the office was like, oh, by the way, why don't we just turn all of that sort of that noting into learnings of the week, so we can do like a flash quiz. So any trainee coming through can like learn it on a patient that they can see, and they can go back and see, the scans and and I was like, that's amazing. Right? That then takes all of my medical students that fundamentally look bored when they just have to follow me around on a ward round and be like, look, here's like, can you go off and do something in a really different way? And again, all of that is like, like brilliantly, that's 2 or 3 times a week where somebody's having those ideas. And I think it's for people like us to go, hey, let's take those ideas and turn them into something that can scale and can be useful and actually get done.
Yeah, totally right. I love that idea. It's interesting that you honed in on the MDT stuff, because as we've started thinking about agentic AI in our own product, we start from a patient-facing angle, right? And we've started putting some agentic stuff in terms of patient-facing voice, and I'd like to talk about that in a moment or so. But when we've put together our theory of change, it ends with essentially an MDT. It ends with MDT, and it has. I've got a slide, of course, because I'm a management consultant, and it's got multi-human, multi-agent teams collaborating on a patient's care. And I think that world where the MDT could be done by people who aren't necessarily in the same room, coordinating on a platform of some sort, with the help of a set of agents that are going in, listening, documenting, adding to the thinking, going away and reaching out to the patient, getting new information, coming back, adding that to the corpus of data that we have on that person, and ultimately providing essentially a personalized care team. That's where I think this is going. And that just it fills me with so much excitement to think that it might...
And then to go back to it, nowhere else has the same, the huge amount of data.
Yeah.
So somebody was again, we're sat there, you sit there thinking okay, well, okay, so you're going to do that. Great. So then I've got to get an agent that's trained off a huge amount of data, or even has enough data to create synthetic data to learn off of, and you get in this really exciting world of I can, the data is no longer the limit, but the starter data is still, and go, well, nowhere has that much.
No.
And the other thing is nowhere has it with such diversity.
Yeah.
Which I think then is fab. You sort of sit there when you go into any NHS hospital, regardless, just the UK is hugely diverse. And that, that is brilliant. And actually this is literally happened on the way here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to not necessarily articulation this. So I came out of the office to come over here, and there was a lady in a wheelchair, so just a bit down, holding a dog. So I don't, the lady, well, she's not going to watch this, but anyway, no idea who she was. The lady must have been about in her 60s.
Yeah.
Little dog, and I presume granddaughter or somebody 20-year-old, knelt at the wheel of the wheelchair.
Okay.
And so I sort of came out. I thought I was going to be late, so rushing. I thought, hang on a minute, that is not a normal scene, right? That's it's not often that I see just somebody stranded on a wheelchair, in a wheelchair holding a dog.
With a dog.
So I'd go in with somebody sat on the floor next to them. So I went over and I was like, oh, how do you, I was like, you're right. And they've got the dog lead caught in the wheelchair wheels. And actually, this is not about London, a few people walk past, and people rushing to one place or another. Some other guy came out of nowhere. You could hardly speak English, but was like, oh, do you need some help?
Yeah, nice.
And then between us, and then I sort of sat there thinking, well, I'm going to go find some scissors because, I've got zero patience. So I was like, we'll just cut the dog lead and get this thing done. He's like, oh no, go over there. So Ginny pulled it apart anyway. And but what I loved about it was that, and I'm sure that happened in any major city.
Yeah.
But there was something about what I enjoyed about that little interaction was it was diversity that got us.
Yes.
Or it was the willingness to give it to care.
Yes.
And to not be broken, have those barriers. And I don't think that's true of most countries and or healthcare systems.
No.
It's definitely not true of most staff groups.
Yeah.
So when I walk into Frimley, I can't remember, there's a place that, I don't know, there's 73 different languages. Or,
right.
There's something about it, that is unusual. No one has a huge workforce that goes, actually, I've been able to do this, I've got that, and that is fantastic. That's something we've got to protect and then try and work on scaling.
Yeah, that is, I have to admit, I'd never even thought about that angle before, but that's huge, because we are going to try and export this, the technology being trained on a proper breadth of thought and ways of working is a massive advantage that the NHS has.